On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected. Sophie Nyweide, a former child actress known for her roles in films such as Mammoth, Noah, and An Invisible Sign, passed away on April 23, 2025, at the age of 24. Her family disclosed that she died due to self-medication stemming from unresolved trauma and emotional pain. Born in Burlington, Vermont in 2000, Nyweide began her acting career at the age of 6, debuting in the film Bella. She quickly gained recognition for her performances alongside prominent actors, portraying complex characters that belied her young age. Despite her early success, Nyweide stepped away from acting in 2015, and details about her life afterward remained private. The circumstances of her death highlight the challenges faced by child actors, particularly the pressures of early fame and the difficulties of transitioning to adulthood outside the public eye. Her family's statement emphasized that she was a kind and trusting girl whose openness sometimes left her vulnerable. They also noted that she wrote and drew voraciously, with much of her art reflecting the depth of her struggles and traumas. In the immediate aftermath of her passing, tributes poured in from fans and colleagues who remembered her talent and the warmth she brought to her roles. Her death sparked conversations about the mental health challenges faced by young performers and the importance of providing support systems for them. Nyweide's untimely death serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities surrounding early fame and the need for greater awareness and resources to support mental health, especially among young individuals in the entertainment industry. Her legacy endures through her performances, which continue to resonate with audiences and serve as a testament to her talent. In honoring her memory, her family requested donations to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, reflecting a commitment to addressing the issues that affected her life and advocating for others facing similar challenges. William Shakespeare, the literary titan whose words shaped the English language and Western drama, died on April 23, 1616, in his hometown of Stratford-upon-Avon. The exact cause of his death remains uncertain, though scholars generally accept it as natural causes, possibly exacerbated by illness. A parish register records his burial 2 days later at Holy Trinity Church, where his grave still lies beneath a solemn epitaph warning against moving his bones. While unmarked by dramatic violence or scandal, Shakespeare's death signaled the closing of an unparalleled literary era during the English Renaissance, a period in which the power of words was rising to rival swords and crowns. Shakespeare passed away at a time of transition. England was evolving from the Elizabethan to the Jacobean era, grappling with new political tensions and religious divisions. His life spanned the reign of Queen Elizabeth I and the early years of King James I, both of whom were patrons of the arts. His plays often reflected the complexities of power, morality, and ambition, concepts that remained deeply relevant to the shifting socio-political climate of his time. The quiet nature of his death contrasts the vivid depictions of mortality and political intrigue that filled his works, from Hamlet to Macbeth. The immediate consequences of his passing were surprisingly muted. While he had achieved fame in his lifetime, his reputation grew substantially posthumously. It was not until 1623, 7 years after his death, that two of his fellow actors, John Hemingis and Henry Condell, compiled and published the first folio, preserving 36 of his plays, many of which would have been lost otherwise. Shakespeare's legacy has only amplified with time. His influence permeates literature, film, theater, and popular culture. Statues, theaters, most notably the reconstructed Globe in London, and countless adaptations continue to immortalize him. His words have entered common speech. His characters serve as cultural archetypes, and his themes, love, jealousy, power, fate, still resonate with audiences today. His death, devoid of spectacle, reminds us that mortality is often quiet, but legacy can be thunderous. Shakespeare's enduring relevance reflects humanity's desire to understand itself through stories, to seek meaning in mortality, and to ensure that memory, like his verses, shall not fade. Sawyer Sweden, a young actor best known for his role as Geoffrey Barone on the beloved sitcom Everybody Loves Raymond, tragically died by suicide on April 23, 2015, at the age of 19. His death was self-inflicted by gunshot while visiting family in Texas, and it sent shockwaves through Hollywood and the broader public who had watched him grow up on screen. His sudden and violent passing underscored a deep and pressing issue of the modern era: the mental health crisis, particularly among young people, and the unique pressures faced by child actors navigating fame from a young age. Sweden's death reflected the increasingly recognized struggles of youth in the digital and entertainment age, issues like identity confusion, isolation, and the unseen weight of public life. Though his on-screen persona was filled with innocence and laughter, behind the scenes, Sawyer, like many former child actors, may have been grappling with the challenges of transitioning from stardom to adulthood. His death echoed broader conversations about how society supports, or fails to support, mental well-being, especially in industries that place youth in the spotlight. The immediate response to his passing was an outpouring of grief and sympathy, especially from his family, co-stars, and fans. His on-screen parents, Ray Romano and Patricia Heaton, issued heartfelt tributes, remembering him as a sweet and wonderful boy with a quiet and gentle soul. It also reignited public discourse around youth suicide and the responsibility of media and institutions to provide mental health resources. Though his life was brief, Sweden's passing amplified awareness. It became part of a larger, somber narrative about the unseen struggles many face, regardless of their outward success or public image. In this sense, his death helped shift cultural conversations about vulnerability, encouraging more open discussions about mental health in Hollywood and beyond. In the years since, Sawyer Sweden has been remembered through tributes, interviews, and calls for greater support for young performers. His story lives on as both a celebration of his work and a somber, cautionary tale, highlighting the urgent need for empathy, awareness, and change. Pette Goddard, a celebrated actress of Hollywood's golden age, died of heart failure on April 23, 1990, in Ronco sopra Ascona, Switzerland, at the age of 79. Her death, while natural, marked the quiet conclusion of a life once lived in the glaring spotlight of cinematic fame, political intrigue, and intellectual circles. Goddard's passing reflected a bygone era, one when stars weren't merely entertainers, but cultural icons whose influence stretched from Hollywood to world affairs. Goddard had lived a full and complex life. She starred alongside Charlie Chaplin in Modern Times, 1936, and The Great Dictator, 1940, the latter a bold satire of fascism at a time when many in the industry were hesitant to speak out. Her personal life, too, was emblematic of her era's evolving values. She was romantically linked with Chaplin and later married literary giant Erich Maria Remarque, author of All Quiet on the Western Front. Their union reflected the blending of art, politics, and intellect that characterized mid-20th century elite culture. By the time of her death, Goddard had long retreated from public life. Her later years were spent in relative seclusion, yet she left a lasting mark. Upon her passing, the press briefly revisited her film legacy and her relationships with iconic figures. But it was her quiet philanthropy that solidified her posthumous legacy. Notably, she left $20 million to New York University, funding scholarships and academic programs, an enduring testament to her belief in the power of education and intellectual freedom. Goddard's death did not dramatically shift history's course, but it did signal the closing of an era. She was among the last living links to the silent-to-sound transition in cinema, and to a time when movie stars carried immense societal clout. Her life and death remind us how fame can fade, but influence can persist in quieter, deeper ways. In remembering Pette Goddard, we see how history immortalizes through contrast, her vivid on-screen presence versus her private, dignified end. Through university endowments, classic film retrospectives, and biographies, her image endures, highlighting humanity's desire to preserve beauty, intellect, and the golden glow of a glamorous age. Boris Yeltsin, the first president of the Russian Federation, died of heart failure on April 23, 2007, at the age of 76. His passing marked the end of a turbulent political chapter in post-Soviet Russia. Yeltsin's death from natural causes reflected both the physiological toll of a lifetime under intense pressure and the unraveling health common to his generation of Soviet-era leaders, men who bore the weight of empire and reform in equal measure. Yeltsin's presidency was a time of seismic change. He oversaw the collapse of the Soviet Union and sought to introduce democratic reforms and a market economy, moves that earned both praise and severe criticism. His death, though not sudden or violent, rekindled passionate debate over his legacy. Was he the liberator who led Russia out of communist rule, or the architect of chaos that left millions impoverished in the 1990s? The immediate aftermath of Yeltsin's death was marked by a state funeral, the first for a Russian leader since the fall of the USSR. Attended by global dignitaries and domestic politicians, including then-President Vladimir Putin, the ceremony symbolized a moment of national introspection. It was held at the Cathedral of Christ the Savior in Moscow, a rebuilt symbol of Russia's spiritual and cultural resilience, reinforcing the idea that Yeltsin remained tied to the narrative of rebirth. Yeltsin's passing did not shift Russia's trajectory in real time. By then, the country had firmly entered the Putin era. However, his death underscored the contrast between the chaotic openness of the 1990s and the increasingly centralized power that followed. In this way, his memory has been politically charged, revered by some as a champion of liberty, dismissed by others as a failed reformer. Yeltsin's death reveals a broader truth about humanity's struggle with memory and power. We often commemorate leaders not just for what they achieved, but for what their lives symbolized: transitions, ruptures, or ideals. Statues, biographies, and institutions like the Boris Yeltsin Presidential Center in Yekaterinburg immortalize him, offering a curated lens into his vision of democracy, however flawed. Susan Browning, a talented stage and screen actress, best remembered for her roles in Broadway productions like Company and Good Time Charlie, died on April 23, 2006, at the age of 65. Her death, reportedly due to natural causes, marked the quiet end of a life dedicated to the performing arts. Unlike political figures or revolutionary leaders, Browning's passing did not ignite international headlines, but it symbolized a broader truth: that artistic legacies, though often understated, are foundational to cultural memory. Born in 1941, Browning emerged as a notable figure during the transformative decades of the 1960s and 1970s, a time when Broadway was experimenting with edgier, more introspective themes. Her performance in Stephen Sondheim's Company, which earned her a Tony nomination, reflected a shifting cultural landscape. Women were beginning to occupy more complex, autonomous roles on stage, paralleling the broader feminist movements of the time. In this sense, her career encapsulated the era's values: creativity, experimentation, and personal reinvention. Her death may not have caused immediate societal ripples, but it highlighted the fragility of artistic memory. The theater world mourned the loss of a skilled interpreter of character and emotion, and those familiar with her work reflected on the fleeting nature of performance itself. Unlike a monument or a law, a stage role lives only as long as the memory of its audience. Yet, in this ephemeral form, actors like Browning influence hearts and minds, generation after generation. In reflecting on Browning's death, we recognize how humanity preserves memory through art. Though she did not become a household name, her roles are immortalized in cast recordings, archived reviews, and the oral histories of Broadway. Her contributions are part of the collective cultural inheritance, testament to the power of performance to evoke empathy, provoke thought, and inspire change. Her passing underscores an essential truth. Not all legendary deaths come with drama or headlines. Some legacies are quieter, but no less significant. We immortalize such artists not through grand memorials, but through continued performance, critical study, and remembrance within the arts community. Harold Arlen, the iconic American composer, behind some of the 20th century's most beloved songs, passed away from cancer and natural complications on April 23, 1986, at the age of 81 in New York City. Though his death did not command the global attention reserved for political leaders or cultural revolutionaries, it marked the end of an era in American music, an era shaped by melody, emotion, and the golden age of Hollywood and Broadway. Arlen was a creative force behind more than 500 songs, most notably Over the Rainbow, made famous by The Wizard of Oz. The song would go on to be named the greatest movie song of all time by the American Film Institute. His death, quiet and uncontroversial, stood in contrast to the vibrant, often soaring emotion of his music. In many ways, Arlen's passing reflected the fading of a generation that composed not for mass fame, but for the universal human condition, longing, love, and hope. Though not as publicly celebrated as contemporaries like George Gershwin or Irving Berlin, Arlen's death prompted renewed interest in his vast musical contributions. Musicians and scholars revisited his work, and tributes poured in, especially from the theater and jazz communities who had long revered his harmonically rich, blues-inflected melodies. His music had quietly embedded itself in the American psyche, becoming part of national memory, even if his name was not always front and center. Arlen's legacy lives on not through grand political impact, but through the enduring emotional resonance of his work. His compositions, from Stormy Weather to Get Happy, continue to be performed, recorded, and cherished. They are woven into the soundscape of American culture, passed down through generations, and reimagined by countless artists. The story of Harold Arlen's death reminds us that influence often resides in the intangible, a chord progression, a wistful lyric, a note held just long enough to stir the heart. In remembering Arlen, we reflect on humanity's desire to transcend mortality through beauty. His songs are memorials, not carved in stone, but sung in voices around the world. Howard Cosell, one of the most influential and polarizing figures in American sports broadcasting, died on April 23, 1995 at the age of 77 from a heart embolism in New York City. His death was the natural conclusion of several years of declining health, including heart and kidney disease, and marked the end of a voice that had both defined and defied American sports journalism. Cosell rose to prominence during a transformative era in media and athletics. Known for his articulate, often abrasive style and unapologetic honesty, he became the voice of Monday Night Football and an essential presence in boxing, particularly as the commentator during Muhammad Ali's rise. His death did not come with scandal or spectacle, but the impact of his passing was felt deeply within the sports world. It underscored the waning influence of outspoken journalists in an age leaning increasingly toward entertainment-driven coverage. His death reflected the era's shift from hard-edged analytical broadcasting to more personality-driven formats. Cosell stood out in a time when broadcasters were expected to be cheerleaders for the games and athletes. Instead, he insisted on objectivity and commentary, famously standing up for Ali when the boxer was stripped of his title for refusing the Vietnam draft, and later critiquing the increasing violence in boxing. He eventually walked away from the sport after the tragic death of boxer Duke Koo Kim in 1982. The consequences of Cosell's death were not seismic politically, but culturally. It marked the silencing of a critical voice in sports media. Tributes from journalists and athletes alike highlighted his intellect, bravery, and willingness to challenge norms. While often disliked by fans for his confrontational tone, Cosell was respected for his integrity. In death, Cosell's legend grew. He has been immortalized in documentaries, books, and the memories of those who value journalistic fearlessness. His story serves as a reminder that mortality may end a voice but not its echo. Through critical retrospectives and media archives, Cosell's presence lingers, challenging, analyzing, provoking. Henry W. Block, co-founder of H&R Block and a visionary in American business, died of natural causes on April the 23rd, 2019, at the age of 96 in Kansas City, Missouri. His long life was marked not by scandal or spectacle, but by steady innovation and philanthropy that left a deep imprint on both the financial services industry and the community he served. Block's death symbolized the passing of an era shaped by post-World War II values, perseverance, entrepreneurial spirit, and community investment. A veteran of the Army Air Forces during World War II, Block returned home with a desire to help rebuild America, not with bricks, but with financial empowerment. Alongside his brother Richard, he launched H&R Block in 1955, during a time when the U.S. tax code was becoming increasingly complex for the average citizen. The company's success reflected the era's growing middle class and the need for accessible financial services. His passing did not trigger immediate global headlines, but within the spheres of business and philanthropy, it marked the end of a legacy built on trust, service, and responsibility. He was remembered not only for his role in simplifying tax filing, but also for his deep commitment to civic life in Kansas City. His philanthropic efforts included funding education, healthcare, and the arts, notably through the Block School of Management and the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. In death, Henry Block's legacy was amplified as a model of quiet leadership. He wasn't a household name like titans of Silicon Valley, but his impact was tangible in millions of American households each tax season. He demonstrated that entrepreneurship could be both profitable and socially conscious. Block's story reflects humanity's yearning to leave behind a legacy grounded in service rather than spectacle. His memory is honored not just through corporate success, but through institutions bearing his name, continuing his mission. In a world often fascinated by dramatic exits, Bloch reminds us that a legacy can be shaped over decades through consistent, ethical work.